Hi everyone. So today I'm going to tell you a story slant. I'm not going to tell you what parts are true or which parts are not true because that's not the important thing. It's about what the story makes you feel and believe and think. My story is about a former student named Taylor. I taught Taylor many years ago, more than a dozen years ago, and she initially did not strike me as like a super special student or anything like that. She was kind of quiet. When she chose to participate, she had some really great points, but for the most part, she didn't do a lot in class. So over the course of the school year, at the beginning of the school year, I was getting to know my students, and I got to know Taylor more. And there was something more there. She, when she wrote and when she discussed things, she was really, really astute, really perceptive. And I thought, okay, she's somebody who needs a little extra care. So I started talking to her more, getting to know her more, and then I started noticing this odd smell about her. Um, and sometimes it would not be there, and sometimes she would go to the bathroom, and when she got back, I would smell this weird smell. And I started noticing things about her skin that were not common, and her arms. She always wore long sleeves. So I started doing a little investigation into her and getting to know her, and talking to other teachers who knew her and her family. And I found out that her mother and sister, older sister, were heavy heroin users. And that kind of sealed my guesses that she was also using. So one day I asked her if she was using, and she kind of wishy-washied, and eventually I got her to talk to me about her drug use. And she was using heroin, she was shooting on a regular basis, and I tried to get more out of her. So obviously I'm a mandated reporter, so I had to call Children's Services because her mother was giving her access to drugs. So I called Children's Services. It was really, really hard because by this time I had really built up a relationship with Taylor. I cared about her. I wanted her to know that I was doing this out of love, but they don't tell you, Children's Services doesn't tell you who calls. So she wouldn't necessarily know, but common sense would say that it was me. But I was fine with that. Like, that was the risk I had to take because it was the safety of her. So I called Children's Services, and that was a really difficult phone call to have. Children's Services said they were opening an investigation. All this time I couldn't tell her that this was happening because I needed them to happen upon the situation. So Children's Services gets involved. Coincidentally, at the same time, her mother happened to get arrested for drug possession, and so she was in jail. And Taylor, went to go live with her dad, who was not a drug user, which was wonderful. So Children's Services helped facilitate that move. It allowed her to still continue to go to Hayes because her father didn't live in the district. So she and I continued to build a relationship, talk to her about what was going on. She, supposed that I had called Children's Services but never asked me. And she really struggled to try and stay clean. It was a struggle all the time. And so eventually she went to rehab. She went to a facility in Athens, and she was allowed to write, and she could have visitors after a month. So she and I would write letters. She would write me a letter. I'd write her back. And then when I found out that she could have visitors, I decided to come and visit her. So I drove 2.5 hours to go see her in the facility because I really care about my students. And I know that she needed an adult who was steady, who was going to be there for her no matter what. So I went and I visited her, and it was really kind of sad. It was a really isolated area, and she said it was really hard, but that she was making good progress and had been clean for 4 weeks, which had not happened in years. I mean, she was only 16 when she got put into rehab, and she hadn't been clean in years. So it was really, really an important moment for her. Eventually, she got out of rehab and she came back. And she came back to Hayes. She graduated. I got to give her her diploma. She was clean. She had cut off ties with her sister and her mother. Her mother had gotten out of jail, but she was still not communicating with her mother because she knew that it wasn't healthy for her. So she graduates. She actually pulled her grades up and she decided she was going to go to college. She was going to go to Indiana to get away from everything that she was around because it was too tempting. So she went to Indiana University and she would send me updates and emails and things like that. And we would talk on the phone and I was over the moon proud of her. Like she was, you know, the 1% of people that you hear about who make it out. And I was so, so happy for her. Then one day she emailed me and she said that her mom had recently contacted her, and her mom had been clean for a while, and so they were open in communication. Her mom had called her and told her that she had been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. So Taylor felt that it was necessary for her to come back home and help take care of her mother, which I totally understood. But at the same time, I have a lot of anger towards her mother because her mother was the one that created this whole situation and allowed her daughters to be sucked into it and never seemed to care that she did this. Never took any responsibility, never apologized, nothing. She didn't support Taylor when she moved to Indiana when she had no money. And so I had a lot of anger towards her. So Taylor coming back for her mother, I was really worried because Delaware was not a good place for Taylor. It was surrounded with the people that she used to do drugs with and those sorts of things. So I was very worried. But I told her, like, you know, call me, text me, let's stay in contact so that you know you have someplace else to go if something gets bad. So she was at home and trying to take care of her mother, and I would talk, and she said, like, it was really stressful, and, you know, she was going through a lot of emotions and a lot of resurging memories and things like that were troubling her. And I said, you know, remember your method, you know, stay clean, stay focused. And I thought that she was okay, and then I didn't hear from her for a while. And one night I got a text from Mrs. Krause, and she knew my relationship with Taylor and how much Taylor meant to me. And she said, "Is this your Taylor?" And she had a link to a news article that said that Taylor had OD'd and was dead. And her funeral will be happening in the next week. And I was so angry because I knew that if she hadn't come back here for her mother to do the right thing, that she would be alive. That all the stress had gotten to be too much for her and she didn't know any other coping mechanism. And I was so angry at her mom. So I went to the funeral. I went to the visitation and I thought, I'm going to tell her mom all the things I've wanted to say for years and never said. That she's the reason that Taylor is in that coffin. That she's to blame. I was standing in line, waiting to go up, and seeing Taylor in that casket was one of the worst things I've ever seen. It stays with me, and I think about it often. Because she had so much potential. She was doing so well. So I walked past her in the casket, and then that's where they usually have the family members standing waiting to be received. And I see her mother. And I know I've been more of a mother to her child than she ever was. And I tell her, Dad, you know, I'm sorry for your loss. I really love Taylor. She was a wonderful human being. And he was like, I'm sorry, who are you? Because we'd only met like once. And I said, oh, I'm Ms. Upstrom. And he was like, oh, thank you so much for being in her life. You made a big difference in her life. And I was like, thank you. And I went to her mom, and I was thinking, I'm going to say so many things to you. But she was in tears. And I knew she didn't need any more. And that it wouldn't do any good. That she was who she was, and she would deal with those things herself. And so I said, I'm sorry for your loss. And she said, who are you? How'd you know Taylor? And I said, I'm Ms. Upstrom. I knew her for a long time. And she was like, oh, I feel like I've heard your name. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, because I was your child's mother. But that's fine. I was like, mm-hmm. She was like, yeah, it's going to be really, really hard without her. She was really helping me, but my cancer is in remission. So, I credit that to her. I was like, I hope you do something really good with the rest of your life. And I walked away. Because no mother should ever be at their child's funeral. And I felt that Taylor was one of my children. And so that's my story. That's my slant story.